do is talk about what public rail now is. It's public ownership of railroads, of freight. That is an initiative by the Rail Workers United. They've started a coalition organization called Public Rail Now, and it's a great idea trying to bring back public rail. The idea of public rail based on the Plum Plan from 1920, of course, the basic ideas. But we're looking at the current conditions today and what we can do to get it out of the individual hands of owners who have dragged down all the freight operations because of the pursuit of profit and interference by Wall Street. Okay, so I'll start. I'm Bill Shakalis. I'm the chair of the Labor Working Group, Socialist Party USA, and we'll be talking about Public Rail Now, a great initiative that has just been launched in June to look towards getting public ownership of freight rail companies and to operate them in the public ownership in public towards public goals. And at our National Committee meeting, the Socialist Party in July 13th voted to support our proposal for a campaign to join in this campaign. PRN is calling for the return to public ownership of nation's freight rail system. And if you look in, I hope everybody can see the link I sent on Public Rail Now. It tells you what it's about and how the owners have really ruined the whole rail industry. They've laid off tens of thousands of workers. They've had 1- and 2-man railroad cars, freight trains that run for scores and scores of cars that create unsafe conditions. So we see what the East Palestine, Ohio situation did in running off the rails because of a problem that wasn't seen by the one or two person crew, and how it devastated a whole community. And there's been many other instances like that. There's been people killed, rail workers killed on rail, and it's just been a miserable place to work for. It used to be a pretty good job, but they've ruined it because in the pursuit of private profit and Wall Street investments to get more profit out of rail. They've looked to put more trains into freight because that's where the money is. Basically, Amtrak is a separate system that does passenger rail, but some of these rail lines could also do passenger rail as well. We'll get into that. Locomotive rail car infrastructure maintenance has been cut back. Health and safety is put at risk. Morale is at an all-time low in the railroads. And after decades of record profits and record low operating ratios, refusing to make even the slightest concession to the workers who, contrary to Class 1's may state, have made their riches. So it's just been a miserable situation. Public Rail Now has called for, has brought up the idea of the Plum Plan. The Plum Plan came out in 1920. It's named after Glenn Plum, who was a general counsel for the rail unions, who put together a proposal that would make public ownership of rail possible, as what they had under World War II, when the last time it was fully nationalized. Under private ownership, they couldn't get freight and workers and as well as Army personnel, to their destinations because it's such a mess, and they put it under nationalized ownership based on and it worked out very well. Based on that, Plum put together the Plum Plan to put public ownership back into peacetime situation. It didn't pass Congress, unfortunately. So this is an idea that they're looking at again with Public Rail now. Whether they'll use it in full or not remains to be seen. So this is very interesting to us in the Socialist Party, where we deal with what part of our principles and our platform is public ownership and democratic control of the economy. It could be different sections of the economy, whether pharmaceuticals or rail or communications, etc. These ideas go back to the 1890s when the Populist Party put together their program for public ownership of various sections of the economy that were important to them. That was later adopted by the Socialist Party of USA, Socialist Party of America in 1901, which further looked for the collective ownership of major sections of the economy, which brought it under a socialist vision. And so this rings true for us. And looking at what they've done here at Public Rail, it's natural that socialists would be involved. Various socialist activist groups like IWW, environmental groups, DSA, and so on are on board and doing work. We'll do work around this. I think we should do the same, and we are. We're looking at this and see how we can be active in this. It's a unique opportunity to develop socialist vision on such a vital issue as this. It's a good campaign where we get locals involved and individual at-large members as well. So again, Public Rail Now comes from Rail Workers United. We got involved with Rail Workers United back in 2023. We learned about it. They wanted to hear more from us. And it was great to hear that the Rail Workers United had a whole page on Eugene Debs of the Socialist Party because he was a rail worker. He's a great hero to all rail workers because of the Pullman strike of 1894. And they had a page on it. So that was great to see. So we put together a statement of support with that, and we're working on a more full one that's going to the NEC. This is the great thing. I think we should get involved and further get others involved in the party. So to give more detail what our campaign's about, I'm going to hand it over to Colby to explain the various details. And he's been great in working to put a plan together that is very good and helpful to us in organizing all these details. So Colby, go ahead.
Thanks, Bill. Colby Hamilton. I'm I guess I'm still the chair of the Socialist Party of New York City, and I do a lot of work here with the rest of the labor working group that Bill heads up and keeps going, and we're all very appreciative of his efforts. I think one of the things that is important to think about when we start this is, you know, with any of these sort of big campaigns or outside campaigns that have a lot of sort of a good idea, but we have some of our own sort of issues with, is that you sort of have to address the underlying arguments or thesis that is pushing this thing forward. And so I think we've had a good amount of debate in the LWG about the Plum Plan, because that is the central sort of organizing idea that RWU has been using, and that is sort of highlighted on their page as this you know, how this thing potentially might work, is reinvesting that. And I think one of the things that we've come up with in our own discussions, and something that we wanted to sort of make sure was inside of the what was put forward to the NC, was the ability for SP to offer up a version of its own vision, one that doesn't necessarily have to fall directly in line with with what's being put forward. Does it have to be antagonistic? Obviously, there are some very good things, and we ultimately want to see not only the rail system, but big chunks of the economy in public ownership, democratically controlled. So we're looking at the Public Rail Now campaign as something that we want to support. But one of the big things that I think we're starting to sort of have this conversation about is what beyond the plum plan can we discuss. And one of the issues with the plum plan is that it fundamentally is it works to make the capitalist whole. And I think that that's an issue that a number of us have taken with the plan. Effectively, there would be bonds put out to make sure that the owners were paid a fair share for whatever they have, and essentially it'd be paid out of paid for by the state, right? Someone other than the capitalist would have to pay for it, to pay them off either through using eminent domain or some other process. And I think for a number of us, there's an issue with that for obvious reasons, that the capitalist owners here are in no need of getting paid back for something that they shouldn't have had control over to begin with. So these are one of the sort of ideas that I think we have to sort of grapple with, that we're starting to set out a vision for moving beyond that as we discuss how to bring about an action campaign. So obviously the National Committee voted in favor of having this campaign as one of the ones that we would the party would be supporting. And I think for us in our conversations, there have been some ideas. And for example, one of the things that beyond just sort of the support for bringing the national freight rail system, which is what the core of what is being done at the Public Rail Now campaign, is going beyond just that to look at the entire rail system and push towards having Amtrak merged with whatever comes after the sort of private rail ownership of freight, so that there can be one interstate system that is publicly controlled and democratically operated, and that's something we need to be working towards. Obviously, the ecological impacts of rail in general is a huge issue in this, and certainly in the and this is on the case, I think anybody that takes Amtrak in certain areas knows this as well, especially if it's going over lines that the freight rail lines use. There's still a significant amount of not electric rail that's being used, and that's a big issue with the freight rail system currently. So pushing to have electrified high-speed interstate rail as not only to improve the rail system itself, but as a way to help transition transport away from trucks and cars on highways. Also another big piece. And then, I think any sort of large scale rail conversation has to plug in to the intrastate and regional rail systems that a lot of places, I live in New York, obviously our subway system here, a lot of commuter rail operations, there are rail systems out there, but those systems have to grow if we're going to be able to tackle the full scope of the issues that rail sort of gives us the opportunity to deal with, whether it's economic, whether it's ecological, any of those sort of issues. So having this also, the campaign also called for a major push towards the expansion and interconnection of local systems into the larger ones. So these are examples of the ability that the support in the PRA and campaign gives to us, but we can also move beyond that in a policy realm to provide a real socialist vision of what we're looking for that goes beyond simply having to fall completely in line with RWU on this. So from our perspective, I think we're looking at a few next steps, and we're hoping to engage with comrades across the party on. So we're working on having these sort of visions for this outline so that we can have a conversation. But obviously, the first piece of this has been and continues to be the Public Rail Now campaign, which we want to make sure that we are working to support. We want to advance on it, and specifically looking for ways to incorporate locals and individual members across the country. And this is, I think, it's a good way to begin with. We have a couple ideas on this, from just getting the locals to weigh in their support. Right now, the Public Rail Now campaign is calling on folks to pass resolutions and to put out statements of support. So that's an easy one. Just getting locals to do that, I think, would show our commitment to the campaign and also start the process of educating members about this and sort of how this can be a focal point for activity. And I think we would love to work with the National Committee and others to get feedback into these sort of potential plans that we could start putting together. I think we'd like to have a web home for this. We'd like to do other events and activities around education processes about getting other issues that are locally tied to the rail issue highlighted. But I think, as a first step, just getting the feedback and getting other folks in the party interested in and aware of what's going on with this campaign, I think has been a very positive step. And I'll just say in general that anything that I think comes out of hopefully us that are working on this is going to make sure that it will have a specific goals of recruiting for the party, and finding ways to sort of grow our membership. I think that should be a major piece of anything we do. So I think that's about the major thing that we were hoping to discuss. So I think it would be good to open up this to have a conversation, to sort of get some feedback and to talk to folks about what's going on out there. So I want to see how we can make folks bring folks. Does anybody have would anybody like to sort of any questions, any thoughts? Bill, if I've missed anything, please let me know. There's pieces of that I may have not looking at the chat.
One thing is you touched on, we talked about, of course, what's our view of public ownership? What do we talk about public ownership of the major means of production, public ownership of this sector of the economy or this sector of infrastructure and so on. What does that mean? How's that done? And what are the elements of that? That's something we really have to talk about so that we have a clearer sense of that. We talk about worker control, worker community control of the economy. How does that apply in this situation? Workers should have a major say in a lot of these things about real work, et cetera, about the jobs they do, et cetera. And communities, as we see, like East Palatine, you have a bad crossroads, a rail crossroads in many communities, and communities need to have some input on these things. So how's this done? Those are the major ones we talked about. We don't have an answer right yet, but we bring those questions up because if this diverges from the Plum Plan, which has a certain structure of control by workers and managers, et cetera, that seems to have some possibilities. Is one negative is to pay bondholders back, to pay capitalists back who are owners. If you take these companies, these railroad companies by eminent domain, do we want to pay anything back? I'm not so sure about that. will they drift towards that? Will they drift towards a simple bureaucratic view of how to control public ownership without these elements of worker control, community involvement, and so on? So we don't know where this is going. I think you mentioned some of those, and I think those some discussions we're having. So any questions at this point? If you want to put in chat, stack, if you want to talk, we'll take a few messages or raise hand. Okay. See the first one. Okay, Eric has raised his hand. Eric Chester. Okay, you should be able to talk. Go ahead, Eric.
So can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah, it's a lot of different interesting questions involved in this, and I think we should support the RWU plan, but it's a very cautious kind of plan, and we should be a lot bolder in what we propose. For one thing, and Kobe raised it, the question of just focusing on freight doesn't, to me, make a lot of sense. The whole idea of the Plum Plan originally was to continue what had happened during World War I, which was that there was an integrated rail system, freight, passenger, the tracks. It was all controlled by the government. It's a lot more efficient that way. And we have this problem right now with Amtrak running passenger trains on rail tracks that are owned by the freight companies. And of course, from the freight company's point of view, passenger traffic is not a priority. Why should it be? It's not theirs. It doesn't make any sense. The only way to run an efficient rail system is to integrate it. And unfortunately, the RWU plan doesn't provide for that. It provides for a fragmentation where you would have Amtrak continuing to run passenger trains on rail lines that were primarily devoted to moving freight and would therefore give priority to freight. That makes sense. So that's one problem. The other thing is, and this has to do with primarily with passenger. We should be moving people. Colby mentioned this. We should be moving people out of cars and into trains. And the only way you're going to do that is to have high-speed rail. The current rail lines are, many of them, over 100 years old. They're not suited for modern transportation. You can electrify them; they'll still be slow. You need to build new rail lines for, designed to carry modern high-speed trains. Now that will be expensive, no doubt about it. It will be expensive, but that's the only way forward. It'll cost a whole lot more if we allow the planet to go down the tubes, which is the way it's going now. We have to move people out of cars to trains, and the only way to do that is through high-speed trains.
John says the question, how should we expand our network to rebuild lost infrastructure? Meaning, I guess, lost rail lines. Maybe in a lot of your communities, I've seen it here and there in New England. Rail lines have been pulled up and they become trails. They've been walking trails and so on. That's lost, probably very good lost rail lines that could be used again. That's a big problem. We've talked with Ron Kamikow, a rail worker and past president of of Rail Workers United. It's a complicated question, and it gets very difficult. Taking over old properties through eminent domain and so on. It gets very complicated legally. So you have that question. You have a lot of small freight lines. I'm not sure every line can be done high-speed rail. It depends, if every single one can be done, that'd be great. I'm not so sure. Josh had brought up the question of trolleys in cities, and just looking in that briefly, it was amazing in some places like Atlanta and in other places that Buffalo, the huge number of trolley lines were in the cities. It was an internet connected set of trolley lines within a city, and that's what people use to get around the city. However, then when the cars came, in some cities, you said you cannot pass on use trolley lines, get involved into a trolley line. You have to stay off of it because you're interfering with trolley traffic. Others, they let you do that, and that slowed it down, became inefficient, and led to the demise of trolley lines. So for those small areas, trolley lines maybe still be good, in small and just within a city. So there's big questions as of taking back trail lines and so on. And it would take a lot of money to reconfigure rail lines to go to high-speed rail. That's what this will take. It will take money.
So I think Stephanie has asked to be on stack. She's the only one, so.
Okay, hang on, Stephanie. Yeah, go ahead, Stephanie.
Hey, can you hear me?
Yes.
This might be a little off topic, but I was just wondering if you had reviewed what Project 2025 had in terms of transportation. I know one of them I mean, everything they have is completely nonsensical and it's hard to tell what they actually plan on passing. But I know one of the more outrageous aspects is basically defining mass transit as Uber and investing in Uber, I guess. But I was wondering if you had any opinions on what any of their proposals were, or what they might try to do to both the railway union and mass transit if they are able to appoint who they want to head the Department of Transportation and Labor Relations Board and whatnot.
Well, I don't know. I haven't looked at Project 2024 on that. I mean, 25. I don't know. Do they go that detail? I don't know. Big question. Is the other questions, Colby, on part of that? Can you answer?
Yeah, I haven't looked at their specific
Mhm.
plans yet. I guess we probably should, just from a policy perspective, since they're out there making arguments about this, be able to look at it, consider it.
They're anti-big government, they would hate eminent domain, I would think. So you have those problems and political problems which may come up, I'm sure. Any other questions? Let's see.
Hand raised, Bill.
Can you hear me?
Yes, Wayne, go ahead.
Anything in the plan include just labor transition for the trucking industry? We talked about labor in the rail industry. And of course, the rail industry in the process of maximizing its profits for freight has destroyed many rail jobs, laid off many people. But if our goal is to move freight to rail and remove cars and trucks from the road, we're also removing truckers, and we're also removing trucking companies, which is probably not an insignificant labor number. So there's going to have to be some sort of just transition plan for labor that includes them as well. Has that been talked about?
I haven't heard of anything on that. I'm not sure if we talked with Ron Kimco about that. So I don't know. But trucks, sure, diesel trucks, gas trucks, they could be part of the problem. That's the thing. That would have to be addressed. That's all I can say. But I think that getting most of at least passenger rail and a lot of freight. I mean, you have to recreate more freight lines that were taken back and put it in the infrastructure, I think. And then work out a system of freight and passenger rail that works better than it does now. If anybody's run an Amtrak, they know that they've come up to delays. I remember going out to Syracuse from Boston, and we were delayed like 45 minutes, an hour. What's going on? You know, well, they're waiting for a freight rail to go through. Well, the freight rail, the agreement was freight rail was always secondary to passenger rail, but freight kept pushing their noses and you know, taking over freight lines ahead of passenger. So that was the problem then. You'd have to work that out so you have a better functioning system. Okay, LO, who's LO? Yeah, Project 25, okay. Stephanie in chat put something about Project 25 on deregulation. Okay, who's LO? Out of talk, I'm sorry about that. Oh, Charles on my computer, okay, well. Having trouble with that. One of the problems he says is the dispatching. I'm sure that, well, yeah, we don't have all the details how this is gonna run. We're looking at the overview, the macro of things and public ownership. These are problems of implementation, running, everyday running and so on. We don't get into that. So I don't know. Yep, okay. Thanks for the comments, Charles. Okay, so any other questions? So what can members at large and local of the SP get involved, how they can get involved with that? Right now, it's just starting out this campaign. What they're looking for is they get resolutions and support from organizations, large and small, of all types, mostly community, labor, environmental, and so on. Community can mean those that are near rail and so on. But I think a wide variety of all types of community and political organizations like us that support this idea would be welcome. And you could go and find out their resolutions. They have a resolutions page and they have a general resolution and that templates page in public rail. Let's see if I can get this on there. So if you click on that, you see a document. That's for general support. They have various resolutions for labor, environmental, and community organizations. So I'll post that, get involved. For organizational endorsements to support as an individual, mission support and so on. So there's various ways to be involved. But we're trying to be involved as Socialist Party and be visible as Socialist Party. If we can get a number of Socialist Party locals or at-large individuals to support this, that would be a great idea. So if you're an at-large individual or at-large individual to start, if you could support, find an organization, a community organization that you're part of, and get them to support that and fill out a resolution form, that would be great. You could spread the word, talk about the issues, and get them involved. If you're SP local, you can fill out one as SP local and fill that form out. That would be great. This is what they're asking for right now. It's very simple. It's a start. We'll see what comes on down the road. Get educated about these issues. And there are various resources online, including if I can find that, including a white paper. And if you go to the Public Rail Now page, under research, you have a scholarly white paper, which goes in more detail. And I know Wayne will like that, and it gives you some overview, and it's not the last word on the issue, and can be criticized and so on for its lacking and so on. But it's a good informational piece. Okay, page 619 on project 2025. Lots of information on their plans for public transit. Being more supportive of fossil fuel, yeah, you know, truck retrograde, reactionary, ridiculous Republican plan, or radical retrograde plan. Thanks, Charles, for getting that out. Okay, Doc, you have see you have a hand up. Go ahead and speak.
Yeah, the question I asked was if anyone had done any kind of studies or have any kind of information on like cost effectiveness, especially in, I've seen plans where they have like limited regional networks, especially for commuter trains and high-speed rails and things. But building out, as many of you know, building out across the Great Plains is a huge expanse of territory where nobody lives. And so I was wondering if anyone had done any kind of like, you know, simulations or anything like that to determine whether or not building across like a national network would be more cost effective than continuing the current, you know, passenger transit situation that we have in this country. I understand about environmental concerns and fossil fuels and all that, but we know that capitalists don't build things that aren't profitable. And so while there is going to be some operation of public utilities like a national train service at a loss, I was just wondering if it'd be like if anyone's actually done any kind of studies to kind of put those numbers out to let people know what kind of costs, you know, the society is going to incur with if we do something like this.
I don't know of any plan like that. The writer of the white paper, Maddox Thomas, he's a young guy, just graduated Brown. He's into transportation. He might know something about that. I'll look at at the white paper and see if he can find a connection or any information on that. I'll have to contact him. I don't know that question, an answer to that question. You know, high-speed rail, coast to coast, north-south key lines and so on, but then you have a lot of state needs, regional needs, and so on that you might need more revived passenger rail, you know, setup, and then you have running on freight rails. How do you coordinate that? Creating another rail next to it? I don't know. These are the questions. These are technical questions. We're not getting into that. I don't have answers to that. But the general idea is that public ownership is important to take over because capitalists have driven rail into the ground. They have killed people. They have polluted communities. They have done tremendous damage in the pursuit of profit. Them and Wall Street who invest in these things. it's ridiculous. It's intolerable. And it's like, given that they proposed public ownership way back when, that was very feasible, this is what we need to have now. Take it out of the hands of capitalists that want pure profit-driven solutions to public needs. And you need a lot of work dealing with what are the questions? You know, what rail lines do we have to make up, reestablish, hire new people, need a lot of tax money. It would take a lot. It takes a lot of planning and a lot of socialist planning, really, when you look at it, so that you can work in the best possible way to meet the largest number of needs or the needs for regional, community, a state, or national, and so on.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Eric, do you have any other questions?
That's sort of what people were already coming up with this, but you start building a high-speed rail network where there's greatest density. So you go, starting from Boston down along the Atlantic coast, along the West Coast. They've already started building a high-speed rail from LA to the Bay Area, and then they stopped because it was too expensive. Well, we got to stop thinking in those kinds of terms. The real cost of having people continue to go in cars is enormous. The real cost, not the market cost, and we have to keep that in mind. So they ought to finish building that high-speed rail from LA to the Bay Area, and I think Wayne was suggesting a test case. That would be a good test case. My guess, it won't be profitable by capitalist standards, but a lot of people will take it. A lot of people will get off the road, driving from LA to the Bay Area and back, and that'll all be to the good. So that's why we should start and move out from there. And then there are other high density areas in the Midwest, for instance, Detroit, Chicago, Milwaukee, Minneapolis will be another one, right? So you start with that, and then you expand out from there. One final point, of course, this is all old technology in Europe. They've had this for decades. It crosses countries. It's throughout all Western Europe. You can go on a high-speed rail and from Madrid and wind up in Copenhagen. Hundreds of miles. So it's already been done. It's already been done. It's just that we live in a system that is so capitalist bound that they can't even figure out how to create a decent rail system. Pathetic.
So the point that this involves a climate change, and how crucial this is to climate change. The original public rail now is talking about freight, but that's a starting point. They're talking about freight because that's where it's currently the heaviest traffic and where it's going. But we have to involve passenger. Of course, we have to involve passenger. And you get people out of cars, put them in the passenger rail as a major way to handle climate change, get fossil fuels off the highways. And New Jersey could be a good test state, Charles says. Okay. So, okay. So look at those links, look at Public Rail Now, look at their resolution page and how to get involved. But if you get involved, let us know as Labor Working Group. You can send me any other questions about getting involved as Labor Work Group and how to do this. Here's my email, and we'll try to help where we can. But this is an SP local or at-large member getting involved with this, and we'll try to guide you as best we can. This is all brand new to us as well. But I think that this gives us a possibility to be involved with this major issue and be visible as Socialist Party, as socialists, among the other groups out there. And we have a whole tradition going back to Eugene Debs, the Pullman strike, 1894, et cetera, and public ownership. That's part of the old SP of A program, and as well as the Socialist Party USA program. So this is the way of putting those, thinking about these concepts, these basic platform plans, how to put it together, how to make it real. So thank you very much. If there's no other questions, we might end here. Thank you very much and for your comments.